This is Jed Disler, and welcome to The Piano Maven, your friendly podcast guide to piano recordings. I invite you to subscribe to The Piano Maven through my Substack page, and I've provided a link to do so in our episode description. Subscribers get a free download at the start of each month. Usually it's some rare piano item from my vast collection of recordings. And I'm also open to suggestions as to what you'd like to have for the download of the month. But I would love you to consider taking out a paid subscription because that will really help keep this podcast alive and afloat over this next year. I haven't really spoken very much on this podcast about Krystian Zimerman for some reason, but he's a pianist who brings colossal workmanship and pianistic refinement to the table, and his artistic integrity cannot ever be questioned. He's the kind of artist who demands as much of himself as he does of the instruments that he plays upon, and he's the kind of pianist who also thinks twice before making a move, which includes releasing a recording, and his recorded output has been rather sparse over the last few decades. Back in 2017, I reviewed a Schubert disc that proved to be Zimerman's first solo piano release in many years, and it contained two of the big posthumously published piano sonatas, that wonderful sonata in B-flat major with the Deutsche number 960, and the big A major sonata, Deutsche number 959. And I remember when I was reviewing them, I was struck by just how different these performances were from each other, and I still am, rehearing them many years later. Sometimes I've taken Krystian Zimerman to task for being a micromanager, and I felt that his micromanaging tendencies tended to dominate throughout the B-flat sonata of Schubert. And if you listen to the opening molto moderato movement, you'll notice a huge portfolio of expressive devices like ritards and caesuras and tenutos and tapered phrases and all kinds of things that, for my taste, they seem to draw more attention to the pianist than to the composer. Now, I do have to admit these gestures never spill over into vulgarity or really belaboring the obvious or a sense of caricature. But these gestures in Krystian Zimerman's hands seem to stick out predictably over repeated hearings. Now, it's very impressive how Zimerman separates his rhythmically impeccable articulation of the andante sostenuto's left-hand ostinato from the right-hand melodies, and it's just a beautifully multi-textured, three-dimensional effect that's really quite beautiful. What a beautiful sound world he creates. And yet, there is this air of calculation and pre-planning about how he plays this movement, which contrasts to the kind of artless simplicity that you get from pianists like Leif Ove Ansnes or even Sviatoslav Richter. I think his slow movement is beautiful, although his first movement is slower than death, And also Leon Fleischer's remake that was on Vanguard I think that was from 2004. That's also very, very beautiful in this regard, in the slow movement. Now, in the scherzo, I really do like the relaxed lilt that Zimerman brings to the music. And this kind of unpressured tempo provides a lot of opportunities for expressive point making, and Zimerman fully takes advantage of them. Now, it's a matter of one's point of view, I guess, to determine if this is insightful point making or just fussing around. I will leave that to you. But the fourth and final movement is much more all of a piece in Zimerman's hands. But he does something really bizarre. In that opening G natural unison that starts the movement, he clips the right hand but sustains the left hand rather than playing both hands equally, which is kind of weird. But I have to say that Zimerman's interpretation of the big A major sonata, Deutsche number 959, is one of the great ones. This is a fantastic performance in all respects. He brings real seriousness of purpose and attention to detail in this sonata that consistently serves the music first and foremost. For example, in the first movement, his brisk basic tempo and his strong contrapuntal sense kind of minimizes the music's tendency to go off on tangents. Now, maybe somebody like Murray Pariah might offer more lyrical respite and dramatic complexity, but Zimerman still compels your undivided attention, I think. And in the scherzo, Zimerman arpeggiates those quick chords in very different ways, and he gives off a real lovely sparkle and lightness to these passages. And the rondo finale is all about long singing lines and a really natural forward momentum, very much in the style of Maurizio Pollini's fantastic recording of the sonata, also on Deutsche Grammophon. But in terms of detail, Krystian Zimerman goes his own way, and he does marvelous, marvelous things. However, for me, the pinnacle of this interpretation lies within Zimerman's stunning treatment of the slow movement. And I think that the slow movement is worth the entire price of this release, I would say. Here's a case where the precise and painstaking details serve the musical meaning. You'll notice, for instance, how Zimerman clips the detached bass line accompaniment below the treble main theme, and he does so without sounding the least percussive. It's almost like the bass notes were being gently plucked on a cello. And that wild and desolate chromatic buildup in the center of the movement, this is a perfect example of controlled frenzy in Zimerman's hands. And those loud chords at the climax are full-bodied from bottom to top, but they still manage to convey a gaunt and stinging ferocity. And in my review, I called this a moment of grim clarity. So what we have on this release is a fascinating, if kind of problematic, Schubert B-flat sonata, and we have a Schubert A major sonata, Deutsche 959, that I think belongs in every serious piano collection. This is Jed Disler, and you've been listening to the Piano Maven podcast, and I look forward to being with you next time. And I'm sorry that I did not have a Thursday episode last week, but we're back on track this week. Anyway, I will be with you on Thursday.